Today, we're looking at a script analyzing the delay of strikes on Iran, blending geopolitical reports with Jewish moral philosophy from the story of Purim. Let's get right to it.
Yeah, let's jump in.
Okay, so the first thing that really stands out is a structural one. It's about how the piece holds itself together.
Right.
The transition between the hard geopolitical reporting and the religious allegory, it creates a pretty jarring tonal shift, and I think it risks losing the audience.
Oh, absolutely. That is the main friction point in this draft. I read it twice, and that first half is just so gritty. It's all logistics.
You're tracking the USS Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, you're following the carrier group moving from the South China Sea. You're hearing about Netanyahu's diplomatic back channels, White House gossip. It feels like a Situation Room brief.
And then
it's like the music just stops, and all of a sudden we're in a sermon about the Talmud and Queen Esther. It's such a hard right turn.
So the core argument here is that the pivot just feels abrupt. The script basically hits pause on the news analysis to start a whole separate religious commentary.
It really does. It feels like two different scripts were just pasted together.
One for news, one for commentary.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
If the audience for this piece is already interested in a Jewish lens on world events, is a mention of Queen Esther ever going to feel truly out of place? I mean, maybe that hard turn is exactly what they signed up for.
That's a fair point, and I see what you're getting at. They expect that flavor. But I think even if the audience is receptive to the theme, the structure itself is fighting the flow.
How so?
When the writer uses that phrase, now I have to say, from a Jewish moral perspective, it's like drawing a line in the sand.
Ah, yeah.
It tells the listener, okay, the factual part is over, now for the lesson.
Right, or the news is done, here comes the sermon.
It gives the listener permission to just tune out if they're not in that headspace.
Exactly.
So the suggestion here isn't to cut the theology, not at all. It's to integrate it, to build a much stronger thematic bridge so the religious text feels like a historical framework for the strategy, not a separate moral tangent.
That's a subtle but really important distinction. So you're saying don't treat the Purim story as a moral to be tacked on at the end, but as a precedent for the military action itself.
Precisely. Let's take the example of Queen Esther from the script. The writer points out that she approached the king uninvited. That was a huge, calculated risk. She could have been killed.
And in the first half of the script, we spend all this time talking about how Trump's advisors were warning him that a strike might not topple the regime and could spark a much wider war.
That's the geopolitical risk of death.
Right.
That's the bridge. So instead of saving Esther for the end, the narrator could say something more like, much like Queen Esther's calculated risk in approaching the king, knowing it could lead to her own destruction, Trump is weighing whether a strike invites the destruction of his regional alliances.
Oh, that's much stronger. You're using the religious archetype to actually explain the modern strategy.
It makes the religious content immediately relevant to the hard news.
And it totally solves the pacing issue. You're not stopping the story to preach, you're using the preaching to move the story forward.
Exactly.
So building on that, what about the reference to Mordecai? The script quotes him saying, help will come from another place. Right now, that's just sort of floating at the end.
It's a beautiful line, but yeah, it's floating. Earlier in the script, the speaker argues that the Iranian regime is weak, that its days are numbered. That's a political assessment. So you connect Mordecai's faith in salvation to the analyst's confidence in the regime's fall.
Okay, so how would that sound?
The line could become something like, just as Mordecai assured Esther that help would arise no matter her choice, the intelligence suggests the Iranian regime's collapse is historically inevitable. The only question is whether the U.S. chooses to be the agent of that change.
I really like that. It turns the religious text into a lens for political analysis. One cohesive story, not a news report followed by a sermon.
It respects the listener's intelligence.
Okay, so if we fix that narrative structure, we kind of run into a new problem. A strong story with a storyteller who sounds unsure of themselves. The whole thing can just fall apart.
Which brings us right to our second point. The speaker's use of self-deprecating confusion really undermines their authority as an analyst.
Yeah, this one stood out to me too. There's this trend in podcasting to be, relatable.
Of course.
You want to sound like a friend, not a lecturer. But I think this draft maybe goes a little too far with that.
Let's look at the part about Trump's motives. The narrator says, I'm struggling to make head or tail of what Trump is planning. And later, about military capabilities, they say, I'm not a military expert, and I don't know what the American military know.
It creates a really strange dynamic. The listener is tuning in because they assume the host has done the work, done the synthesis. So when the host asks, is he playing 4D chess? It sounds less like analysis and more like they're just bewildered.
It signals to the listener that the host is just as lost as they are. And if you're as lost as I am, why am I giving you my time?
Is there a risk, though, that if you take those phrases out, the host sounds arrogant, like they're claiming to know things they can't possibly know? I mean, no one really knows what's in Trump's head.
That's a fair challenge. We're not aiming for fake omniscience. The goal is to reframe that personal uncertainty into analytical skepticism.
Okay, give me an example. How do you make that shift?
Take the line, I wonder if he is playing 4D chess. It just sounds weak. We could rewrite that to be, the ambiguity in Trump's strategy appears calculated to keep the Iranian regime off balance.
Oh, that's fascinating. You're taking the exact same situation. We don't know what he's doing. But instead of making it about the host's confusion, I wonder, you make it about the strategy's effect.
Exactly. You shift the confusion from the narrator to the target, the Iranian regime. You maintain authority while still acknowledging the unknown.
Let's find out with the military section. The script says, I don't know what the military know. It sounds remarkable that the strongest military on earth couldn't topple the regime. It sounds like the speaker doubts the fact because they don't get them.
Right. The phrasing is weak. Instead of expressing personal disbelief, frame it as an analytical observation. Maybe something like, the assessment that U.S. firepower cannot topple the regime contradicts standard military analysis, which suggests this intelligence might reflect political hesitation rather than a genuine capability gap.
That is so much stronger. It takes the same facts and turns them into an insight about political will, and it doesn't require the speaker to apologize for not being a general.
There's also that part where the script is juggling all the conflicting reports. Some say a strike is imminent, some say it's paused. The narrator just says, who knows what's true?
That's the throw your hands up moment. That's when the listener might just switch off.
We want to avoid that. So instead of who knows, we say something like, these contradictions likely represent a deliberate disinformation campaign or perhaps internal factionalism within the administration. It positions the host as someone who understands why there's confusion, not just someone who's a victim of it.
Okay, so we've tightened the narrative bridge, we've bolstered the host's authority, but even a confident host can lose an audience if the information itself is delivered in a, clunky way.
Which leads us straight to the third critique, synthesizing the sourcing for better pacing. The way it just sequentially lists news sources creates this repetitive laundry list effect that really slows the whole thing down.
This is such a common trap when a writer has done good research. They want to show their work.
Totally.
So the script bounces around. The Jerusalem Post says this, then the Wall Street Journal says that, then Channel 12 says something else, and then you're back to the New York Times.
The problem there is cognitive load. The listener is forced to track publication names instead of the actual arguments. It also makes it feel repetitive, especially because that line, all options remain on the table, shows up over and over from different sources.
I wonder, though, if we group them, do we risk losing the nuance of who said what? I mean, the Wall Street Journal carries a different weight than Channel 12, right?
We don't have to strip the attribution, but we need to change the sorting mechanism. Right now, the script sorts by publication. We need to sort by theme.
Okay, walk me through that.
All right, so let's look at the examples. We have reports about the USS Abraham Lincoln moving from the South China Sea and separate reports about mobilizing regional assets. Currently, they're broken up by other diplomatic points.
So the listener hears a military fact, then a diplomatic fact, then another military fact.
It's like ping pong. We should just combine the WSJ report on the carrier with the Jerusalem Post report on assets into one block. We'll call it Theme A, Military Logistics.
So the script would sound more like, on the military front, we're seeing a massive logistical pivot. The Wall Street Journal confirms the USS Abraham Lincoln is repositioning, while the Jerusalem Post is reporting a general mobilization of regional assets.
See how much cleaner that is? You synthesize the data points into a single story about military readiness. The listener gets it. Okay, the guns are moving. Then you do the exact same thing for diplomatic pressure.
Right, we have Netanyahu asking for a delay from the NYT, and then the Arab allies like Qatar and Saudi Arabia urging caution, which came from Channel 12.
Perfect. Combine those into Theme B, diplomatic breaks. You say, however, while the military is stepping on the gas, regional diplomacy is hitting the brakes. Both Netanyahu and key Arab allies are reportedly urging the administration to hold fire.
That actually highlights the tension between the military movement and the diplomatic stalling. That's the core conflict of the story.
It turns a list of citations into dramatic tension.
And then you could have a third group, right? The hawkish counter-narrative. Lindsey Graham's comments, Ron Dermer's advocacy. You group those to show the internal conflict.
Exactly. The listening experience just changes completely. Instead of thinking, why are they reading me a bibliography? The listener is thinking, I see the three forces acting on the president: the military, the diplomats, and the hawks.
You're trading clutter for depth.
Okay, so we have a cohesive story, a confident narrator, and a clean flow of evidence. But there's one last trap: the exit.
Yes. The fourth critique point, the promotional pivot at the very end, just feels completely disconnected from the content.
This is that classic, and now a word from our sponsor moment, even though the sponsor is the host's own work.
The script finishes this deep analysis of Iran and Purim, and then it's just hang on for a moment. Our new documentary exposes.
It relies on that generic pause. It feels like a commercial break, and it breaks the spell we've just spent all this time weaving. That's when the listener reaches for the stop button.
And the frustrating part is that the thing they're promoting, a documentary called The Great Reversal, is actually intellectually relevant. It's about the reversal of cause-effect in the Israel-Palestine conflict.
The host is missing a huge marketing opportunity here by treating them as totally separate topics. The suggestion is to thematically link that reversal of cause and effect concept directly to the Iran situation. Make the promo feel like a natural conclusion.
That makes sense. But could you argue they're two different? Iran is a state actor, Gaza is different. Are we forcing a square peg into a round hole?
I don't think so. Not if we focus on the mechanism of the deception. The script just spent 10 minutes talking about how the Iranian regime, the aggressor, is trying to frame itself as a victim of U.S. aggression.
Right.
So the host could argue that the world blaming the U.S. or Israel for escalation with Iran is just another example of the great reversal from the documentary.
So the transition could sound something like, we see this confusion clearly in Tehran, where the aggressor is treated with diplomatic caution. But this isn't the only place the truth is inverted. The same reversal of cause and effect is the subject of our new documentary.
Seamless. It validates the listener's time. It says, if you found this analysis of Iran interesting, you will love this documentary because it uses the same intellectual framework.
You could even connect it to the point about the Iranian regime suppressing protest. Just as the Iranian regime obscures violence against its own people, we see that same reversal of truth in Gaza.
It transforms the promo from an interruption into an encore. It stops the listener from disengaging because they don't even realize the content has ended and the ad has begun.
And that's the goal, right? Make the promotional material feel like premium content.
So big picture, we're taking a draft that has really good bones, great research, a unique angle, and we're just polishing the execution.
The material is there. The Purim angle is actually very creative. And the research is solid. This isn't about fixing bad content.
No, it's about removing the friction that stops the listener from enjoying that content.
It really all comes down to confidence. Confidence in the structure, confidence in the host's voice, and confidence in the transition.
So let's just recap the main points of feedback for our listener to take away.
First, and this is the big one, narrative cohesion. Integrate the Purim allegory directly into the strategic analysis. Don't append it, weave it through.
Second, establish authority. Replace those expressions of confusion like "I don't know" with analytical skepticism. Frame the uncertainty as strategic ambiguity. Don't tell the audience you're lost, tell them why the map is blurry.
Third, synthesize your sourcing. Ditch the laundry list. Group your evidence by theme. Military, diplomatic, hawkish. Help the listener categorize the information, not just memorize your sources.
And finally, the call to action. Tie that documentary promotion directly to the main topic through the reversal of truth theme. Use the analysis you've just done to sell the product you're offering. Don't let the ad break the spell.
If the writer can make these shifts, bridging that gap between the military and the moral, stabilizing their authority, and smoothing out the transitions, I think this script goes from a disjointed report to a really powerful, cohesive piece of commentary.
Absolutely. We would love to see how you implement these changes. Please refine the script, specifically focusing on that transition to the Purim story and the grouping of the sources, and submit the new draft for a follow-up review.
We look forward to reading it.
Until next time, keep refining.